chapter 9. We're going to look at another sign that Jesus did that John records for us. Thus far, we've looked at 5 things that John has recorded for us in his gospel. Now we want to focus on this particular one that we find in John chapter 9. I'm going to begin reading in verse 1. As he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said these things, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is he." Others said, "No, but he is like him." He kept saying, "I am the man." So they said to him, "Then how were your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' So I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I do not know." They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner do such signs?" And there was a division among them. So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him, since he has opened your eyes?" He said, "He is a prophet." The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind. But how he now sees, we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." So for the second time they called the man who had been blind and said to him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner." He answered, "Whether he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see." They said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I have told you already, and you will not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" And they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple, but we are the disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, Why, this is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes? We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him, "You were born in utter sin, and would you teach us?" And they cast him out. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you." He said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind. Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, "Are we also blind?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say, 'We see,' your guilt remains." I know that was a long reading, and we're probably just going to focus on the first 10, 11, 12 verses, but I wanted to read that whole story, and we're familiar with the story, but I wanted to read that whole story to kind of get the entire picture that we see here, okay? So, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to close your eyes. What do you see? Nothing, right? Maybe just the back of your eyelids. It might be black. You might have, it's certainly dark. But I want you to think about, with your eyes closed, how that would feel to go about for the rest of your life. Not being able to see anything. Not being able to see your friends, your family members. Not being able to see the food that you're about to eat, that you have eaten, that you will eat. But what if I did this? What if I said, with your eyes closed, keep your eyes closed, what if I said the words White House? What comes to your mind? Probably 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, right? If I said the word pet, what comes to your mind? What picture do you see? Maybe you have a pet that you had when you were a kid. Maybe you have a pet now that you're picturing, and you can see that. You can see that whatever that animal is, that dog, cat, fish, hamster, rooster, whatever it was. What if I said the word car? You probably have an image in your mind of your first vehicle, maybe the vehicle you drive now, maybe the vehicle you dream of having. Okay, open your eyes. How long had this man been blind? From birth, right? There is an island in the South Pacific, and I'm probably not going to announce or say it right. It's Pinjalap is the name of the island. It's less than 3 square miles wide, and its highest elevation is 10 feet above sea level. Okay, so it's not a very big place. In 1755, a typhoon ravaged the island, destroying all of its vegetation and 90% of the population. There were 20 survivors left on this island. They resorted to fishing to survive until the vegetation came back. So you can imagine how long that would take, right? Because of those events, the next generation of Pinjalapians developed a genetic mutation that caused them to be colorblind. In the rest of the world right now, there are less than 1 in 30,000 people who are colorblind. By the way, do we have anybody in here that's colorblind? No? Less than 1 in 30,000 people are colorblind. But on this island, more than 1 in 12 people are colorblind. The irony is the people who have been to this island say it's one of the most beautiful islands that you could visit, with the lush vegetation, the colorful fruit. Just the beauty of that island is really unmatched in a lot of places, and most of the people don't get to enjoy it because of their color blindness. The eye, well, we've said this before, but our bodies are very intricately made. The more that we learn about our bodies, the more that scientists and doctors and people who study our cells, our brains, the more we study about our body, the more we learn how much we don't know about our bodies. The more we learn, the deeper and deeper it gets that our bodies are intricately made. So for instance, people that have color blindness, they don't have, our eyes have rods and cones. Again, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I'm regurgitating things that I'm reading to you, okay? If it's not right, I apologize. But these people are pretty smart. Colorblind people don't have the rods that they need to distinguish. They don't have the cones that they need to distinguish the different colors, okay? Those of us who aren't colorblind, we have about 7 million cones in our eyes that help us to distinguish approximately 10 million different colors. Those with color blindness don't have these cones, so they have to rely on their rods in the eyes, which do not help them distinguish colors the way that we do. So they don't get to enjoy all of the beauty that God has created before us in distinguishing colors. Okay? So again, that's something that is amazing to me. And see if I get this right. Let me find it before I can get it right. I'll get to it. Children, babies. Babies are born legally blind. Don't misunderstand me. It's not that they can't see. It's not that they don't. They're born legally blind. They're born with we have 20/20 vision. They are born with 2400 vision. So they can't really distinguish things any farther than 12 inches from their face. Okay? But they start to develop these things, these synapses that go across our brain from the time they're born till about 18 months. And about 3 months into their development, that's the peak of their creating the synapses that go through the brain. Now, I could bore you, probably be boring, but I could talk about how that's created. But just think about all of these wires that are crossing like roads. If you've been to New York or St. Louis or Dallas, where you got all these roads that are it's just like a big spaghetti mess. Think about that in your brain with even more neurons and wires crossing that is allowing our brains to function in ways that I really don't think that we completely understand. Okay? All of this is happening when a child is born and begins to develop so that they can see. At about 6 months of age, they start to put a mental picture. Think of like a Polaroid camera when it comes out and the picture takes a little time to develop. At about 6 months of age, they start to put the mental picture of mom in their mind to know who she is. At about 8 months, they start to develop the mental picture of dad. And then for the next 2 or 3 years, they start to put a whole bunch of images, kind of like when I told you to close your eyes and when I said White House, you have this image in your mind, a pet or a car or whatever. They start to put those images in their mind so that it's there for the rest of their life, okay? How many images did the man born blind have to put with his vocabulary? 0. 0 images. He'd never seen his mom and dad. Never seen a sunset. He'd never seen the house that he lived in. He'd never seen the food that he puts in his mouth. Right? This miracle, while all miracles are amazing, because God does them, right? In my human estimation, maybe yours too, it kind of seems like we have a stair step from the signs that we've seen, from turning water into wine, then healing the man with the royal's child with the fever, and then feeding the 5,000. It seems like they're getting the signs, the miracles are getting progressively harder in my human perspective. Okay? This miracle, the more I've studied and the more I've read, it's truly remarkable. Most of us take sight for granted. I take my sight for granted. In fact, I've just gotten to a point now, my wife laughs at me. We were driving to Meridian Friday night after work, and I've just now started to need glasses at night. I need them to read sometimes. Like I'm okay with this, but there's sometimes I'll say, "Hey, honey, let me have your glasses. I can't really see that. I can't read that." So I've taken my eyesight for granted. Some of you may have taken your eyesight for granted. Some of you who don't have as good of eyesight as others may not take it as much for granted because you know how much you don't see when you don't have the proper tools to help you see, right? 42 days after conception, a baby's brain begins to form its first neuron. At birth, that same baby will have approximately 86 billion brain cells. As the newborn experiences new sights and sounds, it begins to form synapses in its cerebral cortex. At 6 months, each cell has about 18,000 connections. This process is called synaptogenesis. Now, millions of neurons are firing across neural pathways every second of every day. In babies, this happens at about 225 times the rate of a normal adult. So think about the things that are going on inside a baby as it's maturing and growing, and at 6 months, 8 months, a year, its brain is working 225 times faster than our brains work. Think about that as it's starting to develop and process images and put together things that it's observing in its world. Now, if you were to put a patch over that child's eye when it was born, after 18 months, it will be blind in that eye for the rest of its life. Even if there was no physical deformity, physical defect, nothing wrong with anything that's in its body, it would be blind for the rest of its life over the course of just a few months. Why is that? Because it wouldn't have the opportunity to develop those synapses that it needs to see those images, right? Doctors call the condition of this man that was born blind irreversible because the window of opportunity had closed for him to develop the images that he needs to see to make his life like ours is. But isn't that just when God shows up and does things that we don't expect? How old was Sarah when she gave birth to the son of promise? 90 years old. Well past childbearing years, right? It's impossible. It's impossible for her to have kids. It's impossible for this man to see. But that's when God does the impossible. This man had missed his window of opportunity to see anything for his entire life. Sarah had missed the window of opportunity to have children, to give Abraham the seed that he needs for all the nations to be blessed by. Do you ever feel like you've missed your window of opportunity? You ever feel like something came along or didn't come along, and now that time's passed, and now I'm just going about my life because I missed it? Don't give up. Don't give up. That window of opportunity hasn't closed. Have you lost count of how many specialists that you've seen without any answers to whatever condition you have? Have you had a marriage gone bad, maybe ended in divorce? You're not sure if you can ever love someone again, or you're not sure if you can get married again because you don't want to deal with that heartbreak. Have you ever made mistakes that seems to have sabotaged any credibility or any integrity that you once had? Do you feel like you have a stigma attached to you that has alienated you from friends and from family, that you can't be around them or they don't want to be around you? Have you been so sexually broken that you're not even sure what healthy sexuality even looks like? Those problems are real, right? Those problems are things that we face. We know we may have faced those. We have friends and family members who are going through those same things. But you know what? So was the woman with the issue of blood in Mark chapter 5. So was the woman at the well in John chapter 4. So was the tax collector that we read about in Matthew chapter 9. So was the leper from Mark chapter 1. And so was the woman caught in adultery in John chapter 8. See, these scenarios weren't things that we're thinking about among our friends, families, or maybe even ourselves. These were things that we read about in the Bible where Jesus came in and changed the outlook of each and every one of these situations. Their window of opportunity may have been missed in their minds. Jesus comes along at just the right time, right? Jesus says it's never too late. Jesus says never say never. In verse 2, the disciples asked Jesus, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" What are the disciples, what's the conclusion that they're jumping to?
I think Jewish people, they always, if something bad happened, the person must have done something bad, and they deserve what they get.
We can think about that from the story of Job, right? Certainly as we study and read, we find that people say, people who are wealthy, people who are rich, well, they must be doing things the right way because God is blessing them. People who are not, well, they must be doing something wrong because God is punishing them, right? But that's not always the case, is it? Have you ever questioned God? Have you ever asked God why? Why me? Why am I in this situation? Why are they in that situation? Is that a good question to ask God?
I think sometimes it is, so we can understand.
Is it a sin to ask God why? I don't think so either. We're curious people, right? We're inquisitive. When life doesn't go the way we plan it or the way we think it should go, we want to ask why. We start to maybe even blame, not us, because we wouldn't make that mistake, but we would blame somebody else, right? Did this man sin or did his parents? Did his parents bad people? Is that why this man was born blind? Did we play the blame game? How long has the blame game been around? Did Eve blame somebody? Yeah. Did Adam blame somebody? Yeah. Right? It's been around from the very beginning. Sometimes, though, the circumstances that we ask God to change might be the very circumstances that He's using to change us. Why was this man born blind? Did his parents sin? Or did he sin? What does Jesus say? It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. Sometimes we go through challenging times and we ask why. We may not get the answer that we're looking for.
Don't waste your life on asking why. Don't waste, go with what you got.
Very good.
Be done with it.
Very good. Is that easy to do?
Yes.
For some of us, it's very easy to do. For some of us, it's not easy to do, is it? It's not easy to do that. again, we like to play the blame game, right? I've got a friend who, he was a teammate back in junior college. It's really on my mind right now because I was supposed to go see him yesterday. He lives north of Birmingham in Hartselle. Some friends of mine, some teammates, we were going to get together and we were going to go see him. Just it didn't work out. He was going out of town and wasn't going to be there. He had prostate cancer, beat it. Cancer came back, he beat it. But then just recently, going back for his checkup, it's come back again, and it's really bad this time. So one of my teammates, who his son is actually playing at Southern Miss with my son, we were talking last weekend, and he said it was really bothering him, and he said he said we need to go see him. And I said, well, let's do it. So we were supposed to go yesterday, didn't work out, but it's just really been on my. Why is he going through this? I don't know why he's going through this. Maybe I'll never know. Maybe he'll never know.
Jason, twice you said you were going to see him, not go visit him. See him?
Didn't do that on purpose. That's good. Yeah. You may have gone through situations like that. You may have been through situations. My aunt, who was really close to me, to our family. I'm a double first cousin, which if you don't know what that means, so my mom and her brother married brother and sister. So my mom and my uncle are brother and sister. My dad and his wife are brother and sister. So we grew up close. We grew up together. There's three boys in my family, 3 boys in their family. We're all around the same age. We grew up together. It was always, if you saw one of us, you saw 6 of us. If we went into town, there was 8 of us together. My mom and my aunt and the 6 boys. We were always together. Well, my aunt got breast cancer 10 years ago. Well, I guess no, it's longer than that now. However long, 15 years ago, whatever. She overcame it, she beat it, and she was cancer-free for about 3.5 years. Goes back for a checkup, it comes back, or she's got cancer back, and she fought it, and she fought it for about 1.5 years, and then she finally just said, you know what, I'm tired. I don't want to fight it anymore. And 2 days later, she was gone. Why? Why does that happen? Why does that happen to good people? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do good things happen to... We may not ever know those answers. We can have those questions. We may not ever know those answers this side of eternity. But God may just be using those opportunities that we want to change us, to change somebody else.
He used that problem to help you.
Absolutely.
You had a great aunt. You know, you really looked up to your aunt, and she lived a good life. You want to be like your aunt was. Your other 5 cousins, that may help them want to do just like their mother or aunt, whatever she was, to the other 5. And they may want to help them to do just like she did.
That's right.
She was an example to all of you, to the whole family. I mean, I had people like that in my family, and you know, I want to be like they were, because you know, I want to go where they're going, where I know they've gone, and I think that's, you know, if you had a relative like that, I think that's the only way you can look at that, is that, you know, I've got to live like that person did, so I can go see her when I'm gone. But she is in heaven.
Right.
And that's the way you got to look at things like that. You can't look at like why did that happen? You have to look at it like, you know, I'm glad she was an example for me in this life, because I will be just as good as she was, and I'm going to see her when this life is over.
That takes faith, doesn't it?
Exactly.
It takes faith to believe that, to think that. It takes faith to say, I'm going to keep praying for you. I'm going to keep praying for healing, but healing may not be in God's will. But what is in God's will is Him being glorified. But you got to be strong to say those words, to believe those words, right? It takes a tremendous amount of faith. Because someone with a weak faith may not see that, right?
Just like David said, when the baby died.
Yes.
You can't come to me, but I can come to you.
Yes. That's right. Hebrews chapter 11. We know that is the Hall of Fame of faith, right? Hebrews chapter 11 says this, beginning in verse 32. And what more should I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, of Barak, of Samson, of Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, won strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received their dead by resurrection. If we stop right there, that would be, man, that's pretty incredible. Those people did some amazing things, right? And we know those stories. We read about those stories. We've heard about those things. But the chapter doesn't stop right there. Others were tortured, refusing to accept release in order to obtain a better resurrection. Others suffered mocking and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned to death. They were sawn in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, persecuted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains and in caves and in holes in the ground. Were only the first half of that reading, were only those people in the will of God? Or were all of them in the will of God? Even the ones that were tortured, the ones that were sawn in two, the ones that were killed by the sword, they were in the will of God? Yeah. What if being in the will of God is kind of not safe? Do we still want to be in the will of God?
It's
Yeah.
not what you gain or have in this life that matters anyway, right?
That's right.
So, I look at that Hebrews chapter 11 as the kind of faith that's required to have, because we all go through trials, and my wife hates me to say this, but I use this analogy. We're all dealt a different deck of cards to play with. And you get dealt in life, don't mean that God don't love you. It means He's using you for His purpose. And like some of the folks have said, it may be a relative that you've seen that showed that. We have members here that have shown that didn't defeat a physical disease that they got, but the spiritual battle they won. That's what, when people lose a child, you don't have to worry about a child. The child's innocent. What you got to worry about is a 19 or 21-year-old child who is not into Christ, baptized into Christ, a spiritual realm. And then they die, you got to wonder about that. And we're not the judge, we don't know. But my point is this: the sooner everyone in this room and everyone in the world gets into Christ and becomes spiritual, then that's when Romans 8:28 takes effect for you. Because it don't apply to everybody. But people use that verse wrong all the time, because they think it covers everything. It only works to God's people.
One of the most powerful scriptures to me is when Jesus wept and he was weeping for Lazarus, who was his very best friend. And he knew he was going to go through that suffering of death and be in the grave and wait until he was putrid before he would resurrect him. So all things are done to move us into God's presence, even though his very best friend was to suffer. And that's why he cried. He knew what poor Lazarus was going through when he was leaving his physical body and going into the realm of death.
And I think a rhetorical question to all these questions about this, what about God's only son? Was he in God's will?
You better believe it.
That's all you need to know right there. So people say, why? I know some Christian men in this that I've seen recently that have been through the tragedy of losing a child, losing a grandchild. Why are they still carrying on? Because they like the people in Hebrews chapter 11.
We're familiar, some of us are familiar with Corrie ten Boom, one of the people who was part of the Holocaust. She wrote a book called The Hiding Place. Isn't that right? The Hiding Place? Yeah. One of the stories that she recounts in there, you've probably heard it. I think it's even been shared here before, but she recounts the story of in their little cell that they had, it was overrun by fleas. Like they just had fleas just eating them alive. And her sister, who was kind of the one who taught her how to have the faith that she had to be strong, she used to say, we got to be thankful for the fleas. And she says, why in the world they're eating me up. I'm not thankful for that. Anybody ever had fleas? They're awful. They'll eat you up. And you can't see them, so you never know where they are. You're just scratching. But they were overrun with fleas. One of the German soldiers was coming through, and they were picking out cells to take to the place where they were going to annihilate these prisoners. They wouldn't go into their cell because it was overrun with fleas. And they didn't want to get the fleas on them. They didn't want to be bothered with that. It saved their lives, right? She says we got to be thankful for the fleas. Sometimes we have to be thankful, and that is not hard. That is not easy for us as humans to do. We don't want to suffer. We don't want to go through trying times. We want to have an easy life. We want our roads to be easy, smooth, not bump. We don't want things to happen to us or to our kids where they have to experience pain and suffering. We got to be thankful for those things. It may be preparing us for something down the road. It may be changing our hearts that need to be changed. It may be preparing us to help someone else along the way. But we got to be thankful for those times. We got to be thankful for even the tough times. Any other thoughts and comments? We are about out of time. I have a lot more to go, so we're going to pause right here and finish next week. Yes?
You tell us about your friend that had prostate cancer. I had my prostate cancer out in 2016. And the thing about that, the doctor will tell you that there are certain foods you can eat, there are certain foods you can't. And each time I go to my urologist, he always tells me that mine is still zero. And that's the way I want it.
That's great. Praise God.
You don't know. You could be too late, but if you catch it on time, it'll be taken care of.
That's right.
If you don't, it's like a lot of men, they don't like to go to the doctor. So when they do go, that's when get out.
That's right.
You catch it on time. And you got to eat right. You can't eat anything that you want. I can't eat anything I want. Because if I do, it'll come back. So that's why I try to stay healthy.
Any other thoughts or comments? Yes, sir.
Jason, just to mention, one takeaway from this miracle we read about today is, more things change and more they stay the same. The people didn't believe it. And then it said they were in division about it, in division about the truth. And it's still that same way today.
That's right.
It'll be right there. The truth never changed, but we want to make it fit the way we believe it should be. And it's human nature.
That's right. Thank you guys for your attention. I appreciate it. We'll see you next week.
On behalf of the elders and the church family here at Azalea City, we'd like to thank you for taking the time to tune in to our live stream, watch our service. We hope that it was uplifting to you, challenging to you, encouraging to you. And certainly, if you have the opportunity to come and be a part of us and worship with us in person, we would love to see you soon. But thank you again. We love you and look forward to being with you all very